LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the June 9th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out the weekend's 7 best, most newsworthy clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big 5 corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political commentary for you all tonight. Of the big 5 corporate outlets, however, there's no NBC. NBC News is Meet the Press. Took the week off, even though they always say at the end of the show, if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. Well, do they take it off for the Tonys? Might as well. I mean, actually, they took it off for the French Open tennis, but sports, whatever. Seems like the rest of the shows had sort of a light week as well. I only have 7 clips, like I said, including starting off with my political comedy clip, which is Bill Maher, but not a monologue joke, not even really Bill Maher jokes. It's actually a member of Congress from California, from Irvine, Orange County, California. We had like a big blue wave here in California in 2018, and we turned all of Orange County, which used to be red, Orange County red, now blue. I guess that makes it like Purple County. No, Orange County used to be all Republican. Now it's all Democrat, and Katie Porter kind of made some good jokes during the HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher throughout the show. At one point, like, I saw Bill Maher turn to her and say, "I didn't know you were funny." I don't know, is that like Bill Maher saying he didn't think women could be funny? No, I know that's not true, because he has some funny women friends who have been on the show. But then you'll see Katie Porter makes some good jokes about Joe Biden. In fact, if you look at the main topic of the show is who replaces Trump, and it's about the Democratic candidates for 2020 for president. They're all in Iowa, or almost all in Iowa, or on their way to Iowa, as you'll see in the news clips I show in a little bit. And Biden got in trouble this week for his stance on abortion and the Hyde Amendment. And that's what Katie Porter was talking about. Also have this weird clip at the end, the Fox News Trump impeachment prison update, where Fox News, for a change, was the only one of the 4 corporate outlets that covered impeachment this week, because they were all upset that Nancy Pelosi apparently said that Trump should be in prison. And I'll have a long clip of David Cicilline at the end talking to Bret, the guest host this week of Fox News Sunday, and it relates to an argument I had on my LiberalViewer Facebook page with a whole bunch of conservative trolls about whether Trump is guilty of, or whether there's substantial evidence that Trump has committed crimes, which there are, and that if you watch to the final clip, I will talk about that. But like I said, the main topic is who replaces Trump, and the funniest clip from Bill Maher was not from his monologue, no monologue jokes. It was Representative Katie Porter, first being the strongest Democrat. None of the presidential candidates, they sort of like subtly went after Biden for his stance on the Hyde Amendment, which says no federal funding of abortion. And you'll see Bill Maher kind of sets that up, and then Katie Porter makes some some good jokes. And then when it comes to Bill Maher saying he's squishy on abortion, that's when Katie Porter really takes it over. And I don't know if Bill Maher is really upset by this, or if he's playing upset, to get the laughs at the end. But I'll talk about that a little more with you after you watch this 3-minute political comedy clip with Member of Congress Representative Katie Porter talking to Bill Maher about Biden's flip-flop on the Hyde Amendment over here.
He's saying, "You know what, I'm not for the Hyde Amendment anymore." My question is, when Joe Biden does this, now he's moving to the left because he does want the nomination, which is probably going to be controlled on the left. Is he going to lose those centrist Democrats who are the ones who have him at the top of the poll and are his base?
Look, this is just an issue of right and wrong. I'm the only person sitting at this table who has ever had to face these kinds of healthcare decisions. And Joe Biden is simply Biden's trying to make a political decision here and failing still to recognize that this is a personal decision. And even when he talked about it, he couldn't quite get the word out. It was like, health care for women that might involve, some pieces of you that are sort of, it's like women cannot have social and economic equality without the right to control their bodies, without bodily autonomy, period, full stop. And the fact that Biden, the fact that, look, I was a professor. Better late than never for the student who gets it on the last day of class. But literally, if this is for him a reckoning that's coming out of political motivation rather than out of understanding what it means to be, half of the world's population, then that's a real problem.
Well, come on, there are many women who are pro-choice. I mean, pro-life.
I think that was not. I think that was a.
No. There are many women who are pro-life. It's true. I mean, look, I am pro-choice, but I mean, I'm a little squishy and always have been because they told my mother after my sister, a very difficult birth, she shouldn't have another one. So, knowing that I could have been on the cutting room floor, I'm. What? Why is that so terrible? But I get it. As long as it's still in you.
Your mom made her choice.
Yes.
And we're all here with the consequences of that choice. I just want to say, Mrs.
First of all, fuck you. You can go watch another show. We got a lot on the lot here. If I'm not doing it for you.
I just want to say,
I'm asking the hard questions.
God bless Ms. Maher. God bless her for having you.
Yeah.
I'm sure it wasn't easy. I'm a mom to 3 kids. It isn't easy. But the point is, she and your father, and she made her choice.
Yeah, again, I'm not arguing what you're pretending I'm arguing for, all of you on this panel, and you assholes who
Clint said anything, so I don't think he should be blamed for
He's not. I'm talking to you,
Totally innocent. That's why I stayed out of the frame over here.
What was the question?
And unfortunately, there's a link down in the video description to several HBO Real-Time with Bill Maher clips that are available free on YouTube. That isn't one of them. That's why I had that other background. That's from the Real-Time blog that shows the guests, and I use that as a background when I can't use the YouTube channel videos. The Real-Time YouTube channel videos is the background. By the way, I put links down in the video description to the sources of all the clips when I can, and also to my clip list. If you want to see the 7 clips I'm using, that was the political comedy clip. Most of these clips are on the Democrats, and they're because all the Democrats are in Iowa, and that seemed to be of the 4 news programs, not Meet the Press, that had programs this morning, or had a show this morning. 3 of the 4 really focused on the Democrats being in Iowa. They also had some coverage of Trump's made-up crisis with the Mexican tariffs that he then suddenly solved, even though all the concessions he got from Mexico were pretty much already things that they had agreed to do. And that's something I'll talk about in some of these clips, especially when I get to the Fox News clip, which really focused on Trump's big Mexico deal, you'll see. But I'm going to start off with normally the best, longest news summary is from NBC News's Meet the Press. Chuck Todd does his update at the beginning and then goes to the package. None of that this week. French Open tennis. If it's Sunday, it's not always Meet the Press. What can I tell you? So instead, I'm going to start off with CNN State of the Union. Dana Bash in for Jake Tapper, where the state of our union is looking to the heartland, Iowa, of course, because there are 19 Democrats there. There's this Hall of Fame dinner tonight, I guess. Biden wasn't there, but he's on his way, and then you'll see that they talk briefly about the Trump-Mexico deal and the 90-second news summary from CNN State of the Union this morning over here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in for Jake Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is looking to the heartland. Almost the entire 2020 Democratic field, 19 out of 23 candidates, descended on the first-in-the-nation caucus state of Iowa this weekend ahead of a major campaign cattle call. The annual Hall of Fame dinner happening tonight in Cedar Rapids. One candidate not there is the frontrunner, former Vice President Joe Biden, who is attending his granddaughter's graduation. But both Biden and President Trump are heading to the state later this week. Meanwhile, lawmakers from Iowa are breathing a sigh of relief after the president dropped his threat to impose tariffs on Mexico in exchange for what he says will be stepped-up enforcement on the flow of illegal immigration at the border. And as Democratic candidates try to get traction with Iowa voters, we have a brand new poll from CNN and the Des Moines Register laying out the state of the race. Here it is. Just 5 candidates hit above 2% in the poll. Joe Biden maintained his slot at 24%. Senator Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and Mayor Pete Buttigieg are all virtually tied in a 3-way race for second place. 16, 15, 14, respectively. Senator Kamala Harris comes in 5th with 7% before a sharp drop to the rest of the field. And I want to get straight to Iowa now for our exclusive interview with presidential candidate currently in second.
And that Bernie Sanders clip is coming up. And, you know, I realized that I actually have 8 clips to show you. I forgot to add in the CBS Face the Nation news summaries that I'm going to show you, and I will import that in here. But I noticed that was missing. But in fact, you know what? Maybe I should just show you that one now, because one of the things you saw in that clip was the CNN Des Moines Register poll that was covered by all 3 of the 4, the 3 actual news networks that had news analysis programs this morning. And I'm leaving out Fox News because they are sort of alternative universe news. And even though supposedly Fox News Sunday is one of their straight news programs, and Bret, who was in for Chris Wallace, is a straight news, supposedly a straight news anchor. But Margaret Brennan over on CBS's Face the Nation, and this isn't in the clip list. I have to look. This is I'm calling an audible. I guess, is that what they say? So this is Margaret Brennan. First, she talks about Trump's tweet claiming to solve the Mexico crisis that he himself created, and she talks about that a little bit. And then I've edited that in with her intro to talking to Amy Klobuchar, where I don't have any clips of Amy Klobuchar for reasons I'll explain after we watch that clip. But you'll see that Margaret Brennan here does refer to that same poll where you'll notice Joe Biden's in front, then Bernie Sanders is in second, but statistically tied with both Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg. So they're the all tied for second people at 16, 15, 14%. Then there's one person who is above 2% other than that, and that's Kamala Harris. She's at 7%. And then everyone else is 2 and 1%. And you notice CNN didn't even really mention the 2 and 1% people. But here in this CBS Face the Nation news summary, they mention the 2 and 1% people because one of their guests is one of the 2 or 1% people. Same thing they do over on ABC this week with George Stephanopoulos, because they have Amy Klobuchar and Beto O'Rourke, who have 2%, which makes them so much better than the 1% people. I don't know. That seems that's in this CBS Face the Nation news summary that I called an audible. I'm adding to the clip list. It's the 8th unannounced clip from Margaret Brennan over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. Late Friday, after days of negotiations with Mexican officials and amid warnings from Senate Republicans that they could not back the president's threatened tariffs on $360 billion of Mexican imports, President Trump tweeted that a deal had been reached, that Mexico had, quote, agreed to take strong measures to stem the tide of migration through Mexico. But it is unclear what those new measures are. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, commonly referred to as AMLO, addressed crowds last night in Tijuana, insisting that President Trump, quote, did not raise a clenched fist, but an open and frank hand with his threatened tariffs. We begin with one of the Republican leaders who expressed some doubts about the president's threatened tariffs. That's Missouri's Senator Roy. We turn now to campaign 2020. This weekend, most of the candidates are either in Iowa or headed there. And there is a Des Moines Register poll out this morning. 24% of Democrats likely to participate in the February 3rd Iowa caucus support former Vice President Joe Biden as their first choice. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders comes in second with 16% of support. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren and South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg are right behind him at 15% and 14% respectively. California Senator Kamala Harris comes in at 7%. Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar and former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke are both at 2%, with the rest of the field getting 1% or less. We go now to one of those candidates campaigning in Iowa today, Senator Amy Klobuchar, who is in Cedar.
So do you think that they highlighted the 2%ers like that because they had Amy Klobuchar on the show? Definitely a contrast to the CNN State of the Union, because basically there's Joe Biden in first place, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg all tied at 16, 15, 14. There's a 4% margin of error. And everyone's talking about this is the poll of Iowa voters. This is not a national poll. It's for the first state, the first Iowa caucus, where we're going to have our first actual real votes, sort of, if you count caucusing as voting. And then, like I said, Kamala Harris at 7%, and then the two 2%ers and all the 1%ers with a 4% margin of error. I don't know why you would highlight the 2%ers, unless that was the guest you have, and that's one of the biases I talk about in the corporate news media is that they tend to have their news summaries tend to be biased towards the exclusive guests they have. And it's the same thing on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos here, where they have Beto O'Rourke. I didn't take any Amy Klobuchar clips, even though I kind of like Amy Klobuchar in some ways, except that she's a former prosecutor, and that means she starts in a deep hole with me because, if you've read the new Jim Crow over my left shoulder here, about the huge problem of mass incarceration. And if you've been a prosecutor in the years of mass incarceration, you have to really justify why you participated in that system if you want to be the Democratic nominee for president, I think. That's just my view. And if you want to argue with that, you probably have to read the new Jim Crow first. But trust me, that is a book well worth reading, and if you're disagreeing with me, then you need to read it because it's probably going to open your eyes. But anyways, so Amy Klobuchar is a former prosecutor, just like Kamala Harris and Eric Swalwell amongst the Democratic candidates. Beto O'Rourke, not a former prosecutor. He's like a former candidate for Senate, unsuccessful against Ted Cruz. That's like his big claim to fame, and I never really understood what his great appeal was, and I wasn't really impressed by any of his answers on ABC's This Week, which is why I have no clips of Beto O'Rourke, but I do have the brief news summary from George Stephanopoulos that I think is biased towards the 2%ers, just like the CBS Face the Nation clip I just showed you, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. It may be June, but this week it feels a bit more like January in Iowa. That huge Democratic field flooding the zone. 19 of the 23 candidates in the state this Sunday, and they're going to share a stage later today, the biggest gathering of candidates so far. And a brand new poll from the Des Moines Register shows where things stand just about 2 weeks before their first debate. Joe Biden leads the pack with 24%. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Pete Buttigieg basically tied for second. That's a slip for Sanders, a surge for Mayor Pete since the last Register poll in March. Kamala Harris next at 7%. Tied for sixth at 2%, Amy Klobuchar, and our first guest this morning, Beto O'Rourke. He joins us now from Waterloo, Iowa. Beto, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
I want to
And I don't want to give you any clips of Beto O'Rourke for reasons I already explained. And do you see how, like, the 2%ers were highlighted on ABC? They didn't even show all the 1%ers who are statistically tied with Beto O'Rourke and Amy Klobuchar. That's, like I said, the corporate news bias I always see for shows, when they have an exclusive guest, they sort of like bias their news towards the importance of their exclusive guest. And you saw that with Amy Klobuchar on CBS and Beto O'Rourke on ABC, and like I said, I was not really impressed with any of his answers, but down in the video description, you can watch both the Amy Klobuchar and Beto O'Rourke interviews on the websites of those two news programs, respectively. And now I'm going from like guest bias to actual bias, in these next two clips are from Fox News Sunday, Bret Baier. First, this is like the teaser. All the shows do this, and I usually don't take clips from this because there's like music in the background and it's all like dramatic, and it's not meant to be informative. It's like their summary of what's going to be on the program right at the beginning when you first start the program. But I was really struck by the way the Fox News Sunday teaser, if you want to call it that, for their program in the 90 seconds I'm going to show you here. First, the way that they say that Trump actually backed down from his threats on Mexican tariffs, which that's pretty critical of Trump for Trump TV, Fox News. But then it's very clearly Trump TV, Fox News when they start talking about the threat, the Mexican immigration crisis, and there are many, many scary images you're going to see in these 90 seconds here before they then start talking about how the Democrats are threatening impeachment, which they think is something that's good to rile up Trump's base, apparently. And like I said, one of the last clip I'm going to show you is the Fox News Trump impeachment / prison update, which makes Fox News the only program that really talked about impeachment this morning, as odd as that is. And like I said, that's the last clip. But here is first the teaser, and then I'm going to show you the Fox News news summary, which I will also criticize. But just the teaser, especially the scary Mexicans or scary, it's not just Mexico, it's the other three Mexicos south of Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Nicaragua.
Bret Baier in for Chris Wallace. President Trump backs off his tariff threat with Mexico, and the two countries announce a deal on migrants. Mexico, faced with a 5% tax on goods to the U.S., agreeing to help reduce the flow of migrants from Central America. We'll discuss the agreement and whether Mexico can hold up its end of the bargain with Acting Homeland Security Secretary Kevin McAleenan. And
there is not much support in my conference for tariffs, that's for sure.
How much of a role did Republican defiance play in the president's plans? We'll ask Senate Homeland Security Chair Ron Johnson. Plus, House Democrats plan to move forward with contempt votes against Attorney General William Barr and former White House counsel Don McGahn, as Speaker Nancy Pelosi faces increasing pressure to start an impeachment inquiry.
I respect their impatience. It's important. She's a nasty, vindictive, horrible person.
We're joined by Congressman David Cicilline, a key member of the House Judiciary Committee. Then,
if I believe health care is a right, as I do, I can no longer support an amendment that makes that right dependent on someone's zip code.
Joe Biden flips on federal abortion funding after a backlash from Democrats. We'll ask our Sunday panel about Biden's move to win over the liberal left in 2020. All right now on Fox News Sunday.
And you see, they really emphasized Joe Biden's flip. That was like the only coverage of the Democrats and the Democratic race, even though all three of the other programs that had programs this morning covered the Democrats in Iowa, not on Fox News Sunday. And by the way, I mentioned the Northern Triangle countries, and I put Nicaragua in there, and it's actually El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, not Nicaragua. I apologize for the Nicaragua there, but anyway, I thought that I pretty much pre-criticized that Fox News Sunday teaser clip there, but I also want to show you the Fox News summary where Bret Baier starts off here and talks about Trump putting the brakes on the Mexico tariffs, and there is a little bit of coverage of the Republican backlash on that here. But then they also talk about Trump getting this great deal with Mexico, with like no mention of what you saw in the CBS Face the Nation news summary about how this is sort of like a fake crisis that Trump trumped up, so to speak. No, I guess pun intended there, where, Trump does this thing where he creates a crisis and then, he makes things seem like a lot worse than they are. And he, makes threats, and then he pretends to have solved the crisis that didn't really exist. And the thing here is everything that Mexico supposedly agreed on, and there you'll see that this Fox News reporter, like I was saying, how it's like my show is going to be really short on clips this week because the shows were light. I don't know, all the first line reporters and players were tired coming back from the Europe trip. I don't know. But I've never seen this guy before. David Spunt. David Spunt does the news summary from the White House, talking about the Mexico deal, and gives a long list of all the great things that Trump has won that Mexico had really already agreed to, and I'll talk about that a little more. This is actually the longest of the news summaries, but not really the most informative, and no mention of the Democrats in Iowa over here.
And from Fox News in Washington, President Trump has put the brakes on his plan to begin imposing tariffs tomorrow on all goods from Mexico. In return, Mexico says it will take strong measures to reduce the flow of migrants from Central America across the U.S. southern border. The agreement staving off an economic and diplomatic crisis with this country's largest trading partner, at least for now. In a moment, we'll speak with the acting Homeland Security Secretary, Kevin McAleenan. But first, we begin with David Spunt, who has the latest from the North Lawn of the White House. David.
Bret, President Trump is back at the White House this morning after spending a week in Europe. When he got home Friday night, just a few hours after arriving here at the White House, he announced this trade deal that not only stops tariffs, but it puts significant pressure on Mexico to secure its own borders. President Trump greeting supporters on the South Lawn late Friday afternoon. Just 3 hours later, he made the official announcement, tweeting, "The tariffs scheduled to be implemented by the U.S. on Monday against Mexico are hereby indefinitely suspended." The specifics include Mexico deploying 6,000 troops to its southern border with Guatemala, migrants waiting in Mexico for the asylum process to play out, Mexico offering migrants jobs, health care, and education, and taking action against human smuggling and trafficking operations. Saturday afternoon, Mexico's president held a rally in Tijuana to celebrate the deal with the United States. But not everyone is celebrating. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer sarcastically tweeting, "Now that the problem is solved, I'm sure we won't be hearing any more about it in the future." Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin told reporters Saturday the administration could still impose tariffs if Mexico doesn't live up to its end of the deal. But even the president's close allies in the Senate have no interest in another tariff fight with Mexico.
I would probably push back depending on the circumstances. Again, Mexico is typically a very, very good trade partner. I do support the president's efforts with tariffs against China.
Mnuchin and his team are in Japan right now ahead of the G20 summit at the end of the month. President Trump and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping, the president of China, expected to talk about those Chinese tariffs when they meet face-to-face in just a few weeks. Bret.
David Spunt reporting from the White House. David, thank you.
So I pretty much pre-criticized that clip, the last two clips. But one thing I forgot to mention in those last two clips, there was an image in that last clip and even a brief speaking clip from Mitch McConnell in the previous clip, the teaser clip, where Mitch McConnell is, I don't know why he's wearing that yellow flower on his lapel there, but I had this weird feeling that all of a sudden at some point in his statement, he was going to turn to that yellow flower and go, eat that yellow flower. What do you think? Go back and watch the last two clips and tell me when you see the Mitch McConnell clip, is he going to eat that yellow flower? I don't know. That's something I wanted to mention about the last two clips that I forgot to say before I pre-criticized them, though I think I gave my criticisms of Fox News and Fox News Sunday there in their news summary. One thing I should say is Bret Baier, when he talked to the acting DHS secretary, Kevin McElhaney, or he's acting, so I don't have to memorize his name yet. I think it's Kevin McElhaney or McElhaney. He did ask him about whether Mexico had already agreed to those things that David Spunt, the news reporter, listed. And so he didn't question him that confrontationally. He let him get away with saying, oh no, though he did mention that Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen had already mentioned all those things that Mexico was going to do before Trump even threatened his tariffs, and now he's claiming he solved the whole crisis and got these concessions. And the one other criticism I would make of Fox News Sunday there is they mentioned the Mexican president holding those rallies, but they never really translated what he said. Go back to the CBS Face the Nation news summary, and they actually translated what he said, and he was basically saying Trump wasn't threatening us. He was acting in a fair way with us. And so I guess they're spinning it a whole different way in Mexico. And anyway, I have two more clips. The next clip is the Bernie Sanders clip, where they actually did two segments on CNN State of the Union where Dana Bash questioned him about a whole variety of issues, and I only have one clip that's 2.5 minutes long here. One thing I like about the beginning of this clip is it makes me realize, or it shows me that Senator Bernie Sanders is serious, that he thinks he might actually get the nomination this time. He's the number 2, he's in second place, although statistically tied with Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg in that Iowa poll that everyone's been talking about. But you'll see Bernie Sanders is famous for having crazy hair. I kind of need to get a haircut myself. I actually have a haircut scheduled this week, so should look a little better next week. But Bernie Sanders is obviously concerned about his crazy hair. You'll see at the very beginning of this clip, it's almost like there was this funny CNN clip where their correspondent from Afghanistan or Iraq or something, where he's spit in his hand and he's trying to straighten his hair. Well, you'll see at the very beginning of this clip, Bernie Sanders tries to straighten his hair. But what this clip is really about is democratic socialism, which I've criticized Bernie Sanders on multiple times, and he seems to think it's time to explain what democratic socialism is and how it's not really socialism, as Donald Trump is gearing up to attack all the Democrats or any Democrat who's nominated to run against him for president as a socialist. And I'll talk about the socialist aspect and reiterate what socialism actually is, and how what Bernie Sanders is talking about here is not really socialism. Democratic socialism, according to Bernie Sanders, is not actual socialism. But that I'll talk about after we watch Bernie Sanders first fixing his hair, showing he's serious about becoming president in this clip.
Welcome back to State of the Union. I'm Dana Bash, and we are back with more of our exclusive interview with 2020 Democratic presidential candidate, Senator Bernie Sanders. Senator, you have announced a big speech coming up this coming week about democratic socialism. I remember you gave a similar speech back in 2015. Do you think, though, now the country is more ready for a democratic socialist president like you than it was 4 years ago?
Well, I think the answer is yes, but I think it's important for the American people to understand what my definition is of democratic socialism. It's certainly not how Donald Trump defines it. I've spent my whole life fighting for democracy, fighting against authoritarianism, whether it was in the Soviet Union, Venezuela, or any place else. But what I believe when we talk about democratic socialism is, number one, we have to deal with the massive levels of income and wealth inequality in this country, where you have, and by the way, Donna, this is not something that we see on TV too often, but we do have to deal with it as a nation. Is it acceptable that 3 families in America now own more wealth than the bottom half of the American people? Is it acceptable that the top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 92%? Or that 49% of all new income goes to the top 1%. If we are a real democracy, is it appropriate that you have a handful of billionaires who can spend hundreds of millions of dollars to elect U.S. senators, members of the Congress, governors, even presidents.
So I want to talk about
what we have to do. What I mean by democratic socialism is creating a government that works for everybody, not controlled either legislatively or politically by a handful of very wealthy people. That's number one. Number two, it means that in America we have certain economic rights that are human rights. Healthcare, to my mind, is not a privilege. It is a human right. That's what democratic socialism means to me. It means that if you work 40 hours a week in this country, you should not be living in poverty. It means we should not have 500,000 people tonight sleeping out on the street. It means that we do not have more people in jail than any other country on earth. So when I talk about democratic socialism, it means a vibrant democracy and an economy that works for all, not just the people.
So one of the issues that I would assume you consider part of that philosophy is your plan for tuition-free public college. Your 2020 opponent, Elizabeth Warren, unveiled her...
And there's actually, like I said, a very long interview with Bernie Sanders on CNN's State of the Union, including his response to Elizabeth Warren's college debt plan, and that's all down at a link in the video description if you want to watch all of CNN's State of the Union. But as I've said many times, I think that Bernie Sanders long ago misbranded himself as a democratic socialist when he really means to call himself a social democrat. If, for my European viewers, you know what social democrats are. They believe in capitalism with a strong social safety net. All the things he talked about, the economic rights like universal health care, a strong minimum wage, and then he actually mentioned mass incarceration as one of his third, that was his third item on the democratic socialism description as to what it means for not having the rich and the powerful controlling the system, but the system is responsive to the people. That's what he means by democratic socialism, and that there's a strong social safety net. And he also mentioned that 3 families have more wealth than the bottom 50%. I found this Forbes article from the end of 2017 that said those 3 families, well, there are 3 people, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and Jeff Bezos. But I was thinking, what about Walmart? And actually later you'll see Bernie Sanders talks about Walmart, and that if you see the whole interview on CNN's State of the Union. And so I don't know whether he meant Walmart in the list or who the 3 richest families are, because the Forbes article was 3 richest people. Anyway, you can let me know what you think about that down in the video description. And I have one more, before I get to the last topic, the one clip topic coming up, Bernie Sanders, other than misbranding himself as a democratic socialist instead of a social democrat, and the problem with that is socialism means group or government or collective ownership of the means of production. And if you listen to what he said there, that's not what he was talking about. He's not talking about like Amtrak and the post office and even single payer Medicare for all, unless the government owns all the hospitals and employs all the doctors. It's not socialism because it's not government own or government collective group ownership of the means of production. And I've had some people attack me for saying, oh, that's dictionary definition of socialism. That's not what socialism is. Well, that is what the dictionary says, but I also have a degree in history. I have, I've studied a lot of different historical things, but I do have an undergraduate degree in history, and I did spend some time studying European history and socialism and the utopian socialists and how it led to the scientific socialism of Karl Marx and other, Jean-Jacques Proudhon, property is theft, syndicalism, and if you're a Monty Python fan, that's like, it's a kind of anarcho-syndicalist commune. That's like the very opening scene in Monty Python where, I am Arthur, King of the Britons. And anyway, I'm going way off into a tangent, but I just wanted to say that I don't really support government ownership of the means of production in most cases, but I do support mixed capitalism, democratic capitalism. I think it was that Pete Buttigieg who called it democratic capitalism instead of democratic socialism, or being a social democrat. But socialism itself, government ownership of, or government group or community ownership of the means of production, that I think is a step too far. And I don't know why Bernie Sanders is using the word socialism when Donald Trump is obviously all ready to attack any Democratic nominee as being a socialist and, you know, being like Stalin and the Soviet Union and communist and all that kind of hyperbole. But anyway, so that's the last clip in the Democrat topic. Democratic candidates who are trying to replace Donald Trump by running in 2020. The other way to replace Donald Trump is impeachment and removal from office, although apparently a lot of people think impeachment means removal. Impeachment is just charging someone with impeachable offenses, and an impeachment inquiry is just an investigation into those offenses. The Mueller report has already shown substantial evidence of crimes by Donald Trump, which there are all these like stock responses over in Trump World and Trump TV. Fox News is what I'm talking about. Last week, I spent $5 on Facebook promoting my LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup, and what it bought me was a whole bunch of weird conservative trolls who apparently watch Fox News all the time. They even like ended up citing Sean Hannity by the end. But they have these stock answers to the Mueller report, like no underlying crime. Bob Barr found there was no obstruction and the rules say that's up to him. And you'll see Bret Baier, the supposedly straight news anchor, when he brings up impeachment with his guest, David Cicilline, a Democrat on the Judiciary Committee, I think from New York. He brings up all these stock responses to the substantial evidence in the Mueller report that Donald Trump committed obstruction of justice. And he kind of refers to this chart here that I showed you last week, the Quinta Jurassic chart from Lawfare blog. You'll see when it's red across this chart, the efforts to fire Mueller, the efforts to curtail Mueller, that's E and F, and then I, ordered to McGahn to deny attempt to fire Mueller. You'll see Cicilline talk about all those things. The efforts to curtail Mueller is what Corey Lewandowski, which shows up here, I think. But anyway, I'll talk about all of that a little more after we watch this 4-minute clip where Fox News and Bret Baier on Fox News Sunday seems to be the only news program talking about Mueller and the Mueller report, but it's because Pelosi committed the sacrilege of saying that Trump belongs in prison, which he kind of does for reasons I'll discuss with you after we watch that final 4-minute plus clip from Fox News Sunday together over here.
The other way, let's move on to these investigations. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, quoted by Politico as saying to Democratic caucus members that she wants to see President Trump in prison. I don't want to see him impeached. I want to see him in prison. Number one, did she say that? Number two, do you agree with her?
Well, first of all, I was not in that meeting. I know it's been reported, but let's remember this. We have reviewed the Mueller report. The President of the United States directed Don McGahn to fire the special counsel and then to prepare false documents to deny that he was told to do that. He directed an outside person, Corey Lewandowski, to direct the Attorney General to limit the special counsel's investigation, and a number of other instances of obstruction of justice that are detailed in this report. These are specific things the President did. That's the purpose of our hearing Monday. These are criminal acts, obstruction of justice, clearly impeachable offenses. And so, it's kind of rich to hear the president complain about this when he began a campaign with "lock her up" as his bumper sticker and, led an effort to delegitimize the first African-American president.
So you agree with Speaker
claiming he wasn't born in this country. Look, I don't have any difficulty with those words. I think what is really at stake here is the responsibility of the Judiciary Committee to conduct oversight, to demonstrate to the American people that no one is above the law, including the President of the United States. We're going to get to the truth, and we're going to demonstrate that this president must be accountable for his own conduct.
Here's the problem. The first line of that sentence, I don't want to see him impeached. Whereas many of the members you're talking about, now up to 59 members who've said publicly they would like to see the president impeached, the Speaker is not one of them. So is Jerry Nadler trying to pressure Speaker Pelosi to start impeachment?
But I think there's two things that really, there's unanimous consent within the Democratic caucus on two issues. Number one, that we have to continue to move forward on the agenda for the American people. We've passed 250 pieces of legislation that range in everything from legislation to drive down the cost of prescription drugs, to protection for pre-existing conditions, to tax relief for Gold Star families, to child care access for vets, to restoring net neutrality, a really robust agenda to raise family incomes. We've begun work on an infrastructure bill. We've got to deliver on those things. There's also complete agreement in the Democratic caucus that this president must be held accountable, that no one is above the law, that we have a responsibility to conduct oversight, to follow the facts where they lead them.
But there's not agreement on impeachment.
No, we're not going to let the president engage in a cover-up and prevent the American people from learning the truth. Now, there is some discussion about what's the best vehicle to do it. Is it through our normal oversight proceedings, or is it through the opening of an impeachment inquiry? That's really a process question. But what we really want the American people to know is that the President of the United States directed individuals to create false documents, to lie to investigators, to try to prevent this investigation from going forward. Those are very specific
Even though the Attorney General came to his conclusion after the Mueller report, and it was his decision to make, according to the rules of the special counsel.
No, actually, it wasn't his decision to make. The special counsel says very clearly this is the responsibility of Congress. We certainly know that William Barr auditioned for this job by completing a memorandum of law that suggested the president could never be charged with obstruction of justice, a very expansive view. The president hires him when he hears that wonderful view, and he delivers on that promise when in a very short time he mischaracterizes the special counsel's
because
report.
he says there was no underlying crime. And that's where the argument is.
Right. In fact, so much so that the special counsel saw the need to write a letter and then ultimately have a press conference to set the record straight. And that's what's going to happen on Monday. The American people are going to begin to see the real story and understand the conduct of this president.
Congressman, there is also a political question here. If you look at, there are 41 House Democrats who hold.
And it goes on from there, but like I said before I showed that clip, you saw Baier make these kind of weak arguments against the substantial evidence in the Mueller report that Trump committed obstruction of justice. Barr said no obstruction of justice, and the rules say it's up to him. And Cicilline says, no, Mueller said it's up to Congress. And then also, there's no underlying crime that he's obstructing. And, of course, you don't need an underlying crime, which David Cicilline didn't really answer that well, but and then there's the other thing, like, what did he obstruct? Well, it was Mueller's grand jury investigation, and he just has to intend to obstruct. If you read the actual obstruction of justice statutes, it says that even attempting to obstruct justice is as much of a crime as actually obstructing justice. By the way, before I showed that clip, I said David Cicilline might have been a Democrat from New York, but no, you saw when they flashed the chyron there, he's Democrat from Rhode Island, so my mistake there, sorry about that. But Fox News did not do a good job of refuting anything in the Mueller report about the substantial evidence that Trump obstructed justice. And you can see me refute some conservative trolls on my Facebook post last week. My video last week was Mueller speaks on Trump crimes. And I had, like I said, I spent $5 promoting it on Facebook. There's a link down in the video description to my facebook.com/LiberalViewer page, where I post all my videos, and I got a whole bunch of conservative trolls and spent an hour or two or maybe 3 refuting. It was like a good exercise in using the Mueller report to refute claims that that there isn't substantial evidence Trump committed obstruction of justice. So if you're interested in seeing me basically pwn some conservative trolls on Facebook, there's that link down in the video description. Like I said, that was the last clip I want to show. It's kind of a weird week where Fox News was the only one covering impeachment, but only because they were trying to make it look like Pelosi and the Democrats are crazy to be going after Trump and saying he should be put in prison just because he's committed crimes, or Mueller has put forth this report with substantial evidence he's committed crimes. And before I finish the show, I want to show you the bonus Dash and Sandy clip for the week. Usually the bonus Dash and Sandy clip is something I took during the day on Sunday. I have to admit, this was earlier in the week. It was after last week's show, but before this week's show. I just happened to notice this clip of Sandy barking out the door while Dash seemed not to care at all. I always seem to have some sort of allegory for the Democrats and the Republicans, and Sandy is always the Democrats with like all the power but afraid to exercise it. And then Dash is like the Republicans, the minority party that is arrogant and always using realpolitik to get their goals accomplished. And this is, I think, maybe Sandy's barking at the crimes that Trump has committed and the Republicans are trying to ignore it. I don't know. But like I said, Sandy barking out the door while Dash don't care over here. And that's the show for tonight. I want to also thank my Super Chat contributors from the live show. These are the ones that I was able to get a screenshot of. So thanks for those contributions. And Awesome Robot, I'm not sure about the taxes and the Orange County going blue, exactly what that means, but you can let me know down in the comments section as a live viewer. I try to read the live viewer comments. There are a lot of them during the live show, and I'm busy, so I don't get to read all of those. I do read all the recorded show viewer comments. So if you want me to actually see something for sure, post it in the comments of the recorded show that posts after the live show's over. That's the show for tonight. I will be back next week and every week for the foreseeable future, spending all day for the last 320 Sundays now, picking out the best clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows, adding my commentary and criticism, and showing it to you, the live viewers, the recorded viewers. Thanks for joining me, and until next week, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.